It's time. Time to get credit for the work you've done. Time to get the recognition you deserve. With Purdue Global, you can move forward in your career, for your family, and for yourself. You're worth the investment in yourself to earn a degree you're proud of, a degree that employers will respect. Purdue's online university is designed to support working adults like you who know it's never too late to accomplish your goals. It's never too late to make a comeback. It's time to start yours today at purdueglobal.edu.
This ad is about AT&T's deal on the new iPhone 15 Pro, and it's real, guaranteed. That's not always the case with other ads.
The view of a lifetime.
Only with a pricey upgrade.
Breathe in to find inner peace.
Then pay extra to remove the ads. At AT&T, we mean what we say. Learn how to get iPhone 15 Pro with titanium on us with eligible trade-in. Guaranteed. Connecting changes everything. AT&T.
See att.com/iPhone for details about the guaranteed trade-in promo for new and existing customers. Available for a limited time. Terms and restrictions apply.
This is Holly Fry from Stuff You Missed in History class. Toyota is a leader when it comes to electrified vehicles. Today, battery EVs make up less than 10% of new vehicles sold because of higher cost and concerns about range and charging. Enter Beyond Zero, Toyota's vision for a carbon-neutral future. With an electrified, diversified lineup of hybrids, plug-in hybrids, and battery EVs, Toyota empowers you to choose how to reduce your own carbon footprint. Learn more and get details at toyota.com/beyondzero. Toyota, let's go places.
This episode is brought to you by Terrace Records and their latest release from a band called Red Curtain. It's a self-titled 7-inch that kind of sounds like bands like Superheaven, Jawbreaker, Basement. So visit str.limitedrun.com. You can buy the 7-inch, do it up. Now here's the show. Hello, everybody, and welcome to yet another compelling conversation between me and what I hope is a more interesting person than me, which, 99.9% of the time it is. But I'm your host, Ray Harkins. This is the podcast called 100 Words or Less, and the guest this week is Mr. Patrick O'Connor, otherwise known as Seaton, on The Dan Patrick Show. Now, I know some of you are probably like, what? Like, Dan Patrick? Who's that? If you've watched sports at all in the past 20 years, you probably have heard the name. So basically, I'm totally going to misspeak. So I'm doing this off the cuff, doing no research. But I'm fairly certain Dan Patrick was a broadcaster on ESPN. And I think he had some affiliation with ABC or NBC at some point. But regardless, he broke off from the mothership ESPN a few years ago. And he's doing his own show. It's awesome. It's him, 3 of his friends. They do sort of a roundtable discussion on sports, pop culture. I've watched the show a couple times. They actually support independent music pretty frequently, and this is definitely in part to Patrick's influence on the show. So more on him in a minute. Let me get some observation, pleasantries, business affiliated type things out of the way. And then we'll dive into the conversation with Patrick. Well, 2 things. First of all, I'm in Paris right now, and holy crap, is this place absolutely gorgeous. Let's be honest. If you've never been to Paris, I haven't been. I never had the opportunity to do a extensive tour, well, any touring in Europe, beyond just, doing a little family vacation here or there. But I've been married for 10 years. Me and my wife are hanging out here in Paris. But fortunately, I'm not doing this to impede any of our touristy stuff. So don't you worry. I know you weren't worried, but still. Anyways, so I'm in Paris. And the second thing, so this was like 2 or so weeks ago, but I went to something called VidCon. And for those of you that don't know, which I imagine is a wide swath, I didn't if I didn't have to know about it professionally for my job. It's existed for 6 years. It was held in Anaheim, California, which is about 15 minutes away from my house, so it was nice and convenient, at the Anaheim Convention Center. It blew my mind. So basically what this thing is a convergence conference experience. YouTubers, Instagram famous people, Twitter personalities, Vine personalities. And I know me just saying that probably gives a lot of you the heebie-jeebies because it's like, oh gosh, like internet famous people. Oh, I try not to put on that cynical hat because obviously these are people that I am interested in from, like I said, my day job perspective. It was such a bizarre experience because it had all the markings of things that I'm used to in regards to going to some sort of conference where it's like, oh, here's booths and people selling their stuff, people spreading information, whatever it may be. But then just the amount of interest from like these large corporate sponsors. So it's like you had ABC and NBC there, and then you had like Taco Bell. I don't know. It's just one of those things where it was like, holy crap, there is so much money in this thing that it's blowing my mind. Here's another layer of blowing my mind. So tickets for this thing just to get in the doors were $150 a piece, completely sold out, months in advance. The two guys who started it, John Green and Hank Green. John Green is an author of a book called Paper Towns, Fault in Our Stars, very young adult fare. But the reason I'm giving you all this context is that it was such an impactful thing for me to witness, because it was like, to me, obviously these influential bands that I've obviously been able to speak on the podcast in some capacity have the same effect as a person who is famous on the internet to a 13-year-old girl. And it's so, in a way, it's kind of disheartening, because sometimes these people that are popular on the internet alone, they don't necessarily have any sort of discernible talent, like they might do funny Vine videos or whatever, but they're not trying to be a musician or a singer or anything. And probably if you put them on the spot, you would ask them what do you do? Like, what makes you compelling to these people? They probably would have no answer, and not like it's their responsibility to know why it is that they have 3 million followers on whatever social media platform they're popular on. But it just got so many things churning in my head. I mean, for one, obviously it made me feel old, because there's that where it's like, here I am, 34 years old, surrounded by 14 to 15-year-old girls. But then the second thing, the more nuanced thing, was the fact, like I said, I was being able to draw a comparison to where it's like, oh man, I remember when I heard NoFX for the first time, and that was pretty awesome. And then these people have a very similar experience to, Tyler Oakley, or these other people that I'm not even going to rattle off their names, because they are just going to be meaningless to you, unless you obviously follow that platform or that medium in general. And, maybe it's meaningful. But anyways, I just want to put that in your head. So sometimes it's like I said, it's really easy to be cynical and look at these people and just be like, they're the worst. Our society is going in a toilet. We're dead. We're all dead. We're all stupid. I try to look at it in a somewhat positive light, to where it's like, hey, if people are finding meaning out of this and finding more than just entertainment, and hopefully these people are obviously using their platform for good rather than bad. There was definitely a lot of sex positive messaging in regards to people being comfortable with whatever sexual preference or orientation that you have. So it was cool to see that there were strains of social equality that were being flitted about in this whole this whole world of social media. So anyways, I had to put that in your head, because like I said, it was a very interesting experience for me, and I'm sure some of you will have thoughts of this. So if you do, email me, 100wordspodcast@gmail.com. But anyways, I've rambled on too much. The show is Patrick O'Connor, like I said, known as Seaton on the Dan Patrick Show. And this got keyed into me a long, long time ago from a guest just randomly emailing me, or when I say a guest, I mean a listener of the show, emailing me saying, hey, you should have this guy on as a guest. Him and I started communicating on Twitter, and we were just nerding out big time to talking about Adam and His Package and these completely irrelevant bands and acts from a bygone era. And so I knew that this guy was walking the walk. So anyways, we discussed a lot about the collision of sports and music and all that stuff. So anyways, without further ado, here's my discussion with Seaton, and I will talk to you after the interview is over.
I want a complete redo, maybe change my name, report the losses, grab the claim. It's a shame, it's such a shame, we're pissing away our time.
Until I had a listener of my show email me, because I'm a big fan of finding people that are in unlikely places that aren't really tangentially related to kind of, punk or hardcore. And so the secret punks, I like to call them. Yeah. And so I had a listener email me and was like, hey, you should be familiar with this guy, because he, does cool stuff within the sports world. And I was like, the typical sort of punk mentality in regards to sports is like, right. Oh, I don't know, man. Like, what, jock? Like,
yeah, they don't mix. I actually have a funny story about that with going to get a tattoo.
Please do. That was actually my first question, where it's like, I'm sure most people that do find out that you obviously have a history within that are probably kind of like, huh? Like, how does that make sense?
Yeah. Tommy Helm is a tattoo artist, and he's been on those shows like Tattoo Nightmares and Ink Master and things like that. And through a sponsorship on the show with Spike TV, part of the package was I was going to go down there and get a tattoo from him. And so he was like, I go down there, and they're sort of like, oh, hey, what's up? You know, I'd spoken to him on the phone a couple of times about what I was looking to get. And I get down there, and he was just like, wow, you're not at all what I was expecting. And I was just like, okay, I don't really know what that means or whatever. But so, you know, we start talking, and it turns out that we both had been to like the same shows. Like we were both at, VOD show in, Asbury Park at the Stone Pony. We were both at Fury of Five shows and E-Town Concrete shows, and we knew some of the same people or whatever. And he was just like, I hate to tell you, but you're not a sports guy. I hope you realize that, right? Like, I don't know if you're like confused about your idea. You're not a sports guy, though. You're like a, sort of working class punk rock kid from Jersey, right? Yeah, totally. I just happened to work on a sports show, But so I get that from time to time where people expect the sports guy and they're like, wait a minute, how do you know all this stuff? Or wait, you were at that show? You've been to the Pipeline? Or, all these things. So
I'll use my own personal experience where it's like I'm super into golf, and like I was like junior PGA and like was really focused on that. But at the same time, I would also be going to see, Earth Crisis and Strife and Snapcase when they were coming through. And so anytime anybody found out about one of those worlds, whether it was like, a kid at the show was like, the fuck you into golf for, or vice versa, where it's like, wait, what are you doing after you play a round of golf? Like I to me, and I'm sure you can identify with this, where it's like, I don't know whether it was like comfort or solace and kind of like having these two, for lack of a better term, worlds, like not intersecting with one another.
Well, at a certain point, in high school, I would say, I kind of felt like I came to a fork in the road where the two things didn't meet. There was the sports side of me where I played, soccer, baseball, basketball, things like that. And then there was this sort of punk rock side of me that all I really wanted to do was go to shows and ride my skateboard. And I kind of felt like for some reason, the way I had it in my head, I had to choose one or the other. And it was like the two don't mix, because how could I be at one time a jock and at the other time, a punker kid with green hair? And so I was just like, you know what? I keep soccer. I quit baseball because I just wasn't into it anymore. Basketball just wasn't really my thing. I wasn't very good anymore, and just dove headfirst into music, And but yeah, and then years later, I get hired at ESPN. This must be, I don't know, 15 years later or something like that. I start working at ESPN, and I find all of these like old punker hardcore kids that are all super into music and going to shows or whatever. And I was like, they did go together. What an idiot. What's wrong with me? I could have just done both. Why did I cut one out,
No, I like that. I like that you described that mentality, because you definitely did feel that, not maybe internal pressure, but external pressure, where it's like because these two worlds don't coincide, that you shouldn't, you do have to choose. Like you can't be, you're either with us or against us, so to speak,
Right. Yeah.
But then, obviously as you get older, you realize that it's like, well, I guess the rebellion from the sort of sports world, as it were, was the jock mentality. It was the mentality as opposed to, saying that football is wrong,
Yeah. Yeah. Although, but then the odd part though, is that then at the same time, like I mentioned, I got really into the New York hardcore scene, which at the time was all, it was Madball and Fury of Five and E-Town. And well, those are more, from Jersey, but it was all of this tough guy hardcore, everybody was fighting all the time, all that. So it was kind of like I distanced myself from the jocks, but threw myself into this world of sort of like meathead dudes in a way.
True.
Not to like put anybody down. I love those bands. But it was like some of those shows that you would go to would be like, all right, so I know somebody's getting beat up tonight. And not that necessarily like a wuss or anything, but it was like, damn man, can't we just dance and like go to the show and have fun without it being like, there's 5-on-1 over there, some dude getting beat up. It was weird. I ran into sort of what I was running away from.
No, that's a very good point, because no one would draw those correlative lines between that, but it's like, well, technically you're still seeing sports jerseys at the hardcore show, and it's like, oh yeah, wait a minute, hold on, this is weird.
Yeah.
So were you personally born and raised on the East Coast?
Yeah. Born and raised in South Amboy, New Jersey, which is a small town just outside of Staten Island. It's about a mile square. And so I spent a lot of time in New Brunswick, New Jersey, which had a great scene, going into New York and the Lower East Side, Asbury Park, New Jersey with the Stone Pony. There was a lot of great, it was a great time for music in the, late 80s, early 90s into the 2000s in Jersey. There's a lot of great bands there. Good scene.
Totally. Yeah, no, I definitely remember the first time I started to get out and tour with my own personal band and starting to play that area. It's you don't realize me being from Southern California, it was you had to drive forever, especially from a touring perspective, where it's you can set up shop in New Jersey and play Boston a few hours away and then go to New York. And you were so close to everything, yet each scene was so drastically different from one another.
Oh, and it was all so territorial too. If you were going up to Boston to go see a show, you had to be real careful. And the same thing with, somebody from Boston going to New York. It was all, the whole FSU thing and DMS or, everybody had their turf, it seemed like. And I was never a part of any of that stuff. It was just me and my crew of friends that were just going to shows, but seemed pretty dicey.
Yeah. Oh, it can feel threatening when you're I just wanted to come see a show, but then apparently there's these these rules and regulations that I need to abide by that no one gave me the memo for.
Right.
And so what was your family structure like when you were growing up? What did your parents do for a living?
My dad's a teacher. And my mom worked for the city of South Amboy. She was a court clerk and sort of had a bunch of different city clerk, all those kinds of things.
Oh, okay. What'd your dad teach?
History, middle school history, 7th and 8th grade.
Did you have him?
No. He taught in a different town
than
where we lived.
I'm sure you were grateful in some capacity for that. I don't want my dad as a teacher.
But yeah, I know, right? It probably would have been a little awkward. Do I say Mr. O'Connor? Do I call you Dad? How does that work?
Right. Do I have to do homework? Can you give me a pass for this?
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
Do you have brothers and sisters?
Yeah. Older sister, older brother.
Okay. You're the baby of the bunch.
I am indeed. Yeah. And my personality is exactly of that too.
Describe that, because I'm an only child, so I definitely I identify with most of the symptoms that people used to describe only children. But just describe the youngest of three.
Well, there's the way that a lot of parents tend to put it. The oldest is the experiment. The middle child is the stable one, and then the youngest sort of doesn't get away with everything, but is certainly the more rebellious of the bunch, but taken care of at the same time.
Got it.
Mom, I'm still the baby with mom, and I don't think that'll ever change.
Sure.
And my older brother's always looking out for me, so those things sort of remain through life.
Right. So you were able to, I guess, for lack of a better term, get away with more because your parents were just okay, maybe his like you said, your brother will watch out for you.
Right, yeah. And, they had already been through sort of, the first two kids, so they knew certain things were coming with me. But when you're the baby, you're the baby. So it's oh, well, that's okay. It's just, Patrick being Patrick. Don't worry about it. And, blue hair and staying out all night and whatever else goes with the think oh, look at the baby. He's expressing himself.
Right. Yeah. They're if you were the first, they would be this is serious cause for alarm. But because you're the youngest, it's oh, it's a phase. It's a fad.
Yeah. Don't worry about it. He'll grow out of it.
Right. So, as you started to grow up and matriculate through school, what kind of kid did you find yourself being in high school? And when did, I guess a more pointed question would be, when did independent music start to get kind of introduced to you?
I would say I was into music pretty early, and I would say because of my brother, we shared a room, and he was really into Iron Maiden and Judas Priest and that whole thing. And I was maybe 5 or 6 years old and loved Motley Crue. But they were the coolest thing. Shout at the Devil was the best thing in the whole world. I had a Motley Crue Velcro wallet that I carried with me everywhere.
Awesome.
But then I got a little older, and I sort of always palled around, I guess, or maybe clung to my brother, and sort of their, the older kids and his friends had a big influence on me. So, when my friends were listening to like, MC Hammer and stuff like that, I was just so into The Cure, So that path had been sort of not predetermined for me, but I just followed, I guess, what the older kids were into. And then, once I got really into skateboarding, which is probably, I don't know, maybe 5th or 6th grade, it was over for me in terms of music. That's where you discover, punk rock and all of that stuff. So
Right. Well, yeah, you do. You bring up an important point. Everybody has to have that sort of, gatekeeper. You have to have either it's like, in your case, it's your older brother, in other people's cases, it's like, the weirdo in high school that's like, oh, here you go. And they give you like the, Dead Kennedys tape or something. But yeah, because otherwise it's like, you don't have, you won't have any idea. You're just gonna start picking up stuff and you won't really develop any sort of musical identity if it isn't someone that's kind of showing you the way.
Right. And then, with New Jersey there, I mean, skateboarding was big at the time in the 80s. And I guess the 90s, although people say, I think it's like Mike Vallely says, if you survived the 90s big pants, small wheels era of skateboarding, you're a lifer, because that was just like the worst time in skateboarding ever.
Sure.
My older sister started dating this guy, and he knew that I skated and that I was listening to punk rock. I was listening to like the Sex Pistols and things like that. Right. And I didn't really know a lot of contemporary punk rock happening at the time, or hardcore. And he gave me a bunch of albums and then took me to a show to go see his band. And they were doing like a Sunday matinee at the Stone Pony for Headache Records.
Okay.
And it was like he was in an oi band called Niblick Henbane, and it was like Head Wound, Niblick Henbane, Broken Heroes, and all these oi bands that played there. And I remember getting to the front of the Stone Pony and seeing this punk rocker guy with this huge mohawk, and like, studded out leather jacket and everything. And he was kicking a dead bird. And I was like, whoa, where the hell am I going? I think I was maybe 14 at the time.
Right.
And I was like, I don't really know what this is, but I definitely want to be a part of it. And I had no idea that it was like, whoa, this is happening here too? Like, this is the thing that happens right now. Like, all right, this is awesome. Like, how do I find more of this?
Totally. Because that's an important point. When you do start to, pick up these records of usually bands that are obviously, iconic, but not around, like you're first picking up the essentials, and you can't see, like you said, the Sex Pistols. But when you're like, oh, this is happening down the street from me, like, yeah, what the hell is this?
Yeah, right.
And so then, so as you started to go into high school and stuff like that, were you, like you said, you'd already kind of pot committed to, skateboarding and music. Did you, care about school? Were you just kind of, floating by on average grades to just kind of make your parents happy?
Yeah, I think I was the classic, if he only applied himself kind of thing, like you're smart guy, but you just coast by knowing like, well, I could do just this much and it'll be fine. I'll be like a BC student. And it was just sort of like, okay, so you're going to do high school and then figure out where to go to college. And I was going to college actually to be a history teacher, because I was just like completely clueless as to what to do with life. And, people would say like, well, you can't ride your skateboard or play your guitar for a living. Like, what are you going to do for real life kind of thing? Oh, I don't know. I guess I'll be a history teacher like Dad. I'm good at history, right? So,
yeah. It's like if you've already seen someone else work out a path, it's like, oh, you'll reactionarily go to that.
Right. Yeah. I'm like, well, I don't know what else to do, and I grew up with a really small town mentality, even being in the shadow of New York City. It was sort of like, well, New York is there, but like, the amount of times I heard, well, you can't do that, when I would talk about, things that I wanted to do in life, like a band and we're going to go tour Europe, and like, well, you can't do that. How are you going to, you can't do that. So that's sort of the way I was raised, with you can't do that, get real, get a job, go to college, get a job kind of mentality, and forget about all these silly dreams or anything. Like, you have to, figure out a real life.
This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. Let me tell you, the holidays are awesome. They've got some great moments, whether it's spending time with friends and family, gift giving, all of the things. I personally love Christmas lights. Like, I can't wait to put them up. It just makes me feel warm inside. But there are moments where it's like, man, it's overwhelming, or I'm feeling really alone or sad. All of the things that just, can kind of compound it during the holidays. That is why you need to take a beat and maybe take that moment for yourself. Give the gift of time to yourself. And that's honestly why I love dipping into therapy. That's why I also love working with BetterHelp, because they make finding a therapist online so dang easy. So if you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. Like I said, it's entirely online. It's designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire, and then you get matched with a licensed therapist, and you can switch therapists at any time for any reason at no additional charge. Please, in this season of giving, give to yourself as well with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/Ray to get 10% off of your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/Ray for 10% off your first month. Take care of yourself, please.
We all agree that reducing carbon emissions is a good thing. And once again, Toyota is leading the way. We hear a lot about fully electric vehicles, and Toyota has them, with more on the way. But we also know a BEV is not for everyone, whether it's because of cost, range, or concerned about finding a charging station when you need it. Plus, the raw materials used to manufacture batteries are limited. Enter Beyond Zero, Toyota's vision for a carbon-neutral future, in vehicles and in manufacturing plants too. In the years ahead, the materials used to make just one long-range battery for an EV could be used to make batteries for 6 plug-in hybrids or 90 gas-electric hybrids. That's why Toyota's position today is electrified, diversified, empowering you to choose how to reduce your own carbon footprint with a vehicle that's right for you. A hybrid, plug-in hybrid, or battery EV. So shop, learn more, and get details at toyota.com/Beyond Zero. Toyota, let's go places.
Hey guys, it is Ryan. I'm not sure if you know this about me, but I'm a bit of a fun fanatic when I can. I like to work, but I like fun too. It's a thing. And now the truth is out there. I can tell you about my favorite place to have fun. Chumba Casino. They have hundreds of social casino style games to choose from, with new games released each week. You can play for free anytime, anywhere. And each day brings a new chance to collect daily bonuses. So join me in the fun. Sign up now at ChumbaCasino.com.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18+.
Well, yeah, that's a very, I guess sort of typical or maybe working class parents mentality, where they're just like, what, like this weird art stuff that you're doing? Like, there's no way that could possibly pave the way to anything meaningful, like from a financial perspective. So when you said you had your eyes on kind of the touring prize, so to speak. So did you start a band in high school?
I'm more just jammed in high school. Because that's where I was trying to pick up the guitar then. And then I didn't have like a first sort of, my only semi-legitimate band that actually got decent shows and stuff like that until just after high school.
Got it. And what was the name of that band? And what were you sonically trying to accomplish?
The name of the band was Coexist.
Okay.
And it sort of started as a New York hardcore band. And then everybody, it turned out, had different ideas of what they wanted that band to become. So you would have one song that was, the poppiest thing you ever heard. And then the next thing, just this like total breakdown hardcore thing. And we were a little bit of a mess, but we got a couple of decent shows and had a lot of fun. And I mean, ultimately, it's really just about fun and hanging out with your buddies, So it was, I would say we were successful in having fun.
Right. Well, yeah. And that, like you said, that's the biggest goal. I mean, every band that is obviously, lasting and is meaningful starts from that pure spot. It's not like you're like, oh yeah, like let's make money off this or whatever. Because today, obviously bands could say that with a more realistic approach, but it's not like back then that wasn't reasonable to say that.
No, not at all. And then when you do, the drummer was this kid named Sean McCann, who's really good, really talented, sort of a mess, like life-wise, in that like he never got a driver's license. I don't know if he graduated high school. I think he did.
Sure.
But like, and not that, that's not necessarily like a judgment thing, but it was just like, he couldn't get like a credit card or necessarily hold down a real job or whatever, but he could play the drums like you wouldn't believe. He was the best guitar player in the band, which is always interesting when your drummer is the best guitar player.
Right.
He could arrange songs like, he was just this really, really talented kid. And when he was in a studio or making music, everything made sense to him. I just don't know that anything outside of that studio made as much sense.
Yeah.
But he went on to play in some pretty awesome bands, but he was plugged in like the scene a little better than we are in terms of knowing better people or the right people or something. And he got us a couple decent shows. Like, we opened for Indecision once, and that was like, to me, like, whoa, we really made it. Like,
right.
This is a big deal. Like, this is a huge show. They were such a huge band to us.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like that was cool, getting to do those kind of things, although you realize just how terrible of a band you are. And, like you're up there, you have no idea what you're doing on stage. And you're like, this is so weird. Right. And then like these awesome bands go on after you and you're like, see, now they know what they're doing.
Right. Yeah. You're like, we'll never be like that.
Yeah. Like you guys, you should be doing this. I don't know that I necessarily should be.
Sure. I do think it's interesting. The obviously, like you were saying, the sort of practicalness that was obviously thrust upon you because you couldn't, there was no concept of being able to do, artistic things for a living. Was it one of those things where was there a lot of pushback from you in regards to like, did you have a lot of strife with your parents because of those sort of, hey, here's Patrick, even though he has the baby and we'll give him some slack, he needs to get his shit in order.
Yeah, I especially as I started to get a little older, like 18, 19, 20, 21, those years, I was pretty lost and I think trying to figure out what to do with life. I'd failed out of college and was just sort of working a handful of different jobs. I was a mailman for a while. Like I was just doing all of these different things and pretty lost and had no direction in life. And I think that was tough for my parents, and ultimately me.
Right. Yeah. I was about to say, were you reflective over those times where it was just like, because I do think that your description is very, symbolic of a lot of people that, are attracted to, these things that don't seem practical. And then, you just kind of wander around until something kind of works itself out. But, were you reflective over those times of being like, man, I hope something opens up, or were you just like, well, I guess I'll do this for a while?
Yeah. Once the path sort of opened up to me, I was just like, oh, okay, I think I get it now. It's like maybe there is more out there than just this mail truck and going to the bar every night with my friends, and it felt like another sort of split in the road here where it was like, all right, I'm getting to be a little older now and I do have to start figuring something out because so far nothing has really worked for me. And I don't really have anything going, and I don't want to be. I mean, I support the Postal Service and the union and everything, and I'm
right.
like, this is awesome. But I knew that, all right, I'm making great money doing this, but I don't really want to be a mailman for the rest of my life. That's not what I have. I have ideas in my head or this feeling that there's something bigger out there that I just have to figure out.
It's definitely an itch. It kind of just like gnaws at you, and I think it's funny because I don't think. This is a judgment call, but I don't think a lot of people have, a majority of people have that feeling. Some people just kind of lock into something and they kind of do that. Maybe they're like not satisfied with their job or whatever, but it isn't that itch to do something more, it's just strange. So it's like hearing you say that, it's kind of like, oh yeah, that kind of puts it in a more, crystal fashion where it's like, oh yeah, it's clear when that you're wanting to do, be able to express yourself in a different way rather than just, like you said, delivering mail.
And, I just knew that, like if I went to a show and I would be down in the crowd, most of the time I was just like, who are those people standing behind the band? Like, that's where I want to be. I want to be one of those guys watching the crowd now. I don't want to, like, I like dancing and I'll still, jump off the stage or whatever. But I want, what are those people doing? And or do they work, or are they just friends? Or if I went to, like a baseball game, I would see all of these other people walking around down on the field. And I'd be like, well, wait, how do I get down there? That's where I want to be.
Right. Yeah. No, that's true. That there is a lot of people don't realize that there's a lot of work that goes into, whatever, getting a band on a stage and putting together, obviously a baseball game. It's not just like the players show up and that's it. Like there's so many other things that are behind that.
Right. And, now that I look at younger people, in their, say, early 20s who are, promoting and putting on shows, or they started a label, they started a zine, they started, whatever it is. I'm like, damn, like, how did you figure that out on your own? Like none of that ever dawned on me that, like, wait a minute, maybe you're not a good guitar player, but you could go work for a record label. That's a real thing. Or maybe you should pick up a camera, or maybe, there's a million other things you could do. And none of that ever dawned on me. I was completely clueless to that whole behind the scenes thing until, later on in life, until, say 21 or something, where I was like, wait a minute, there's a lot more that goes into this than just, being the guy singing.
I think that's kind of symbolic of I guess the education system in general, where it's like, you're, for lack of a better term, forced to think of obviously practical applications to your quote unquote skills. And so it's not like you could show up to school and be like, oh yeah, like I think I want to take the, I want to put out a 7-inch elective or whatever. Like the ideas of the sort of tangential relations to whatever you're interested in. It's like, yeah, just figure out a way to make money off of what you like. Like that's ultimately the path that you should try to take, maybe.
I always felt like I think the system failed me, and not that I should be able to do things for myself. But I feel like at certain formative years, I didn't get any type of guidance or any type of assistance into saying like, right, okay, so you're really into music or skateboarding, go pick up a camera and you could shoot these videos, or maybe you could go do, whatever it is, just one person and maybe I should have figured that out on my own, but to sort of push me in that direction. And instead, all I ever got was, which was clearly the wrong thing for me, was, so, okay, well, that's great, but what college are you going to? And what's your real job going to be? I mean, we just told this story on the show not too long ago about how, like, high school guidance counselors and what was your safety school or whatever. And I was like, what was your reach school? And I was like, I don't know. I think college was a reach for me.
Right.
Just in general. Right. But, I had this vivid memory of going to my guidance counselor and sitting down, and he was just like, so are you even thinking community college, or are you just going to go work for the city out of school?
You're
and
like,
I was like,
that's it?
But thanks, dick. Like that's all you have in guidance for me? This is the one time a year I'm going to meet with you. And it's just like, so are you even really thinking about school, or
right.
Are you going to try community college maybe, or are you just going to go work for the city? And I'm like, all right, awesome. Well, thanks. I'll just, I guess I'll figure those things out.
Right. I guess those are the two doors that I can look into.
Yeah. And so then I said to him, I was just like, well, actually, I was thinking about going to West Virginia. And he was like, you should have seen his face. Like, whoa, all right. Great. I guess we could look into that.
Right.
What the hell's wrong with you, dude?
Right. Yeah, I guess we'll look into that. Is that the college that you went to, or where did you, because I know you said that you obviously dropped out, but what college did you go to?
Yeah, I went to West Virginia for a year, and then I had a crazy, crazy year. Probably a bad idea going away to a gigantic party school. And then
so you got involved more so in the party scene than the academic scene.
I got a PhD in that 1 year. There's no doubt about that. I was already well on my way too. I was already very well on my way. But yeah, I became a master. I got my master's there, okay. And then came back sort of a mess. Tried community college for half a semester, and then was just like, all right, it's not for me. It's definitely not working. I need to take time off and figure some things out.
Right. Did it ever get dark for you in there, as far as like, what am I doing? Or was it all like generally sort of, above the board partying, as it were?
Oh, no. I got very below board.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, no, it was not a good scene.
Got it.
But, you sort of figure it out, and you're like, all right, this isn't working out. You start getting in a little bit of trouble, mm-hmm. and it's like, okay, now we have to do something with life.
Right. But did you fortunately not get arrested during that time, or were you put in the pokey?
Well, for little things,
Sure.
like I got arrested in West Virginia for there was like a fight. My buddy got into a fight at a bar with a bouncer, and it was like, it's really more of a ticket, but they bring you down. Like it really wasn't anything serious.
Right.
And, that was part of the thing in the town that I grew up in, since it was so small. And my mom worked for the city. My dad for a while was a city councilman. I knew all of the cops by first name. So, I guess maybe this goes back to being the baby thing. But, anything that I did, it always got taken care of, So if I got caught like drinking underage or something, they just brought me home to my parents, and we're like, hey, we caught Patrick down here or whatever. Or, I would be out. We used to go to this South Amboy is right on the Raritan Bay, which looks over Staten Island. And so that was sort of one of our spots that we'd go hang out and drink some beers. And the police would come down, they'd catch me and all of my friends, and they wouldn't get out of the car. They would just over the loudspeaker go, Mr. O'Connor, does your mother know where you are tonight? And like all of my friends would be just dying laughing at me, and the cop would say like, Mr. O'Connor, you mind picking up those cans? Mr. O'Connor, can you walk over to the car, please? And like they just made fun of me the whole time. And we'd be like, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? They would give me a little bit of a talking to or something. But, so everything was, we all knew each other. It was just a small town. Everything was taken care of. Nothing got too serious.
We all agree that reducing carbon emissions is a good thing. And once again, Toyota is leading the way. We hear a lot about fully electric vehicles, and Toyota has them, with more on the way. But we also know a BEV is not for everyone, whether it's because of cost, range, or concern about finding a charging station when your battery gets low. You start freaking out. Plus, the raw materials used to manufacture batteries are limited. Enter Beyond Zero, Toyota's vision for a carbon-neutral future in vehicles and in manufacturing plants too. In the years ahead, the materials used to make just one long-range battery for an EV could be used to make batteries for 6 plug-in hybrids or 90 gas-electric hybrids. That's why Toyota's position today is electrified, diversified, empowering you to choose how to reduce your own carbon footprint with the vehicle that's right for you, a hybrid, plug-in hybrid, or a battery EV. So shop, learn more, and get details at toyota.com/beyond0. Toyota, let's go places.
With the Lucky Land Slots, you can get lucky just about anywhere.
This is your captain speaking. We've got clear runway and the weather's fine, but we're just going to circle up here a while and get lucky. No, nothing like that. It's just these cash prizes add up quick. So I suggest you sit back, keep your tray table upright, and start getting lucky.
Play for free at LuckyLandSlots.com. Are you feeling lucky? No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18 plus terms and conditions apply. See website for details.
Denise has been playing jazz for 40 years. Last concert, one of the musicians fell sick with RSV. Respiratory syncytial virus, or RSV, is a highly contagious virus that can lead to breathing problems. This time, she's choosing to help protect herself with Pfizer's RSV vaccine, Abrysvo. Abrysvo is a vaccine for the prevention of lower respiratory tract disease caused by respiratory syncytial virus, RSV, in adults 60 years of age and older. Abrysvo is not for everyone and may not protect all who receive the vaccine. Don't get Abrysvo if you've had a severe allergic reaction to its ingredients. People with a weakened immune system may have a decreased response to Abrysvo. The most common side effects are tiredness, headache, pain at the injection site, and muscle pain. Ask your pharmacist or doctor about Pfizer's RSV vaccine, Abrysvo, respiratory syncytial virus vaccine. For full prescribing information, please call 1-844-989-7284 or visit abrysvo.com. Brought to you by Pfizer.
Excuse me, pardon me. I must interrupt this great conversation we're having with Kevin for today's sponsor. It's Casper Mattress. Now, I know what you're thinking. Mattresses, really? But this is the real deal. It's obsessively engineered and American-made at a very, very fair price. And now you, the listener, can get $50 towards any mattress purchase by going to casper.com/words and using the code WORDS, WORDS. Now listen, we spent a third of our lives asleep. So we're laying on beds for a third of our lives. Don't you want to make that a good experience? Casper brings together two extremely comfortable technologies for better night's sleep. Latex foam and memory foam. You know what those two things are. You've laid on those, whether it's a pillow or a mattress. But Casper has just the right amount of sink and just the right amount of bounce, no matter what you're desiring from a mattress. And they've got a risk-free trial and return policy. They will deliver it right to your house, and you could try it for 100 days. And if you don't like it, they'll pick it back up. That's amazing, because how painful is the process of shopping for a mattress? You go into a store, you lay on it for like 30 seconds, and you're like, I guess this is good. And then a truck comes out, and they barely are able to fit it in your house, and it's just a nightmare. This is so much easier, because you will actually get to sleep on this. So it's $500 for a twin-size mattress and $950 for a king-size mattress. Compare that to any other industry average, and dude, it is an absolutely amazing value. So like I said, $50 towards any mattress purchase by going to casper.com/words and using the code WORDS, WORDS. I've slept on these things. They're incredible. Just do it, okay? It helps the show, and it also helps you sleep and wake up and feeling awesome. So like I said, $50 towards any mattress, casper.com/words, using the code WORDS. Terms and conditions apply, of course, all that legal jargon, but do it. Try Casper. You won't regret it. I want to let you know about some cool stuff, and that cool stuff is in the form of a record label called Terrace Records, run by the vocalist of a band called Seizures, who is a close friend of mine, but he's doing some amazing stuff with his record label. His record label is called Terrace Records. His latest release is a band called Red Curtain. It's a self-titled 7-inch that, like I said at the top of the show, has sonic markings of bands like Superheaven, Jawbreaker, Basement. It is a total DIY operation. Obviously, he's running this out of his bedroom. He just wants to basically support good music and put out cool records. Visit sunterracerecords.bandcamp.com. Stream the stuff. Listen, put those in your ear holes. I just encourage you, because this is a total DIY operation. I've put out records myself. It's a tough proposition. So go support Terrace Records. And, let's listen to a little bit of the song too. This is Red Curtain, and here's a song from them just to give you a little taste.
I think I'll write it down this time. A pattern only I can see. It makes so much sense to me. I think it's in the books I've read. History is telling me. Thinking faster than my
There you go. That was Red Curtain by the 7-inch. Become educated, support good people, and learn about the label. So Terrace Records, str.limitedrun.com. You'll be able to buy the 7-inch, do everything you want there. Now back to the conversation. That's a really safe environment to grow up in from that perspective. And then you're like, oh, I can get in trouble for these things. I'm not just going to get a pass because of my relationships.
Right. Well, yeah, and it's a safe environment to grow up in, but it's also a total bubble, that you don't realize just how warped your little universe is until you get out of it. Like I didn't realize just frankly how racist my town was until I moved away and was just like, whoa, like people aren't like that around, everywhere. And then you don't realize certain things about yourself that you're like, whoa, wait a minute. Actually, you know what? It's not cool. Like, you sort of have to deprogram yourself in a way from just a certain way of thinking maybe, or, just certain like things, jokes that other people found appropriate, like, wow, you know what? It turns out that's really not cool.
Well, yeah, that's a very important point, because I definitely think that, the small town mentality that gets described of people is like, obviously, like you don't know anything, but it's like, with you kind of obviously got, a bit of the outside world coming into that. So then you're able to match those two things up. But then also once your world got bigger, it was like, oh yeah, like I didn't know people did that. That's pretty messed up or whatever. Yeah.
Well, the town is, like I said, it's a mile square and there's say maybe like 10,000 people in it. And it's like 99.9% white. It's split down the middle, Irish and Polish. And so, you could just go from there,
right.
This little bubble, and
you could figure out what sort of prejudices may be placed upon people based off of those two descriptions.
Yeah. And so while, at, my teenage years and I got, like Operation Ivy and Unity and all of that stuff. And you're like, oh yeah, you know, I didn't grow up in a racist household. I didn't grow up, you know, anything like that. But you just figure out that there's things that are inappropriate that you thought were normal everyday life that you're like, whoa, not cool. And yeah, then I moved to Connecticut. And it was like, yeah, I definitely have some unlearning to do, or some things that have to change.
Right. I may have a different perspective now based on my surroundings.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely. 100%.
Yeah. And so then, you know, after you got through the years of wandering, so like radio started to obviously open up for you in regards to that seemed like a path that you obviously wanted, you know, kind of go down. And then obviously kind of another sort of stereotype of obviously, you know, punk and independent music in general is, you know, I mean, radio is the quote unquote enemy. It's like whatever's on the radio probably sucks, and not like you were gravitating towards it because of that. But yeah, so like, is it one of those things like you just liked the medium and obviously not so much the, you know, the actual music that was being played or what have you?
It seemed like the one way that I could get sort of a foot in the door of the music industry, or at least a step in the right direction of doing something for the rest of my life that I would enjoy. Mm-hmm. You know, and it certainly got me that sort of like a little bit of access into other things that I'm like, wow, I wonder where this could take me. You know, and I could, you know, go see bands, or I could go work for Howard Stern, or, you know what I mean? Like one of those things. I'd gotten really into radio listening while I was delivering mail, and I would just drive around listening to all these different shows. And that's sort of where it hit me, where I was like, wow, you know, that could be pretty cool, because this reminds me of if I was listening to talk radio, it sounds like me and my friends making fun of each other. So I can do that, you know? Or maybe there are still cool radio stations out there, like alternative radio, that I would be okay with, you know, playing whatever songs they're spinning. It just seemed like a step in the right direction, and at least finally like a path of, oh, okay, I think I'm going to be able to figure this out.
Right. Yeah. Like you said, there's like your foot in the door to where hopefully other opportunities can kind of open up from that perspective.
You know, it was actually strange too, because when I got my first like legit radio job, I was working at a hot AC station in Hartford, which is, you know, sort of like they would call it soccer mom music. You know, it's like Sugar Ray and Smash Mouth and Richard Marx and stuff. And I'm like, wow, like this is so not punk rock, you know? Right. But then right at that same time, like Jimmy Eat World broke, and The Middle was the biggest single in the world. And then that sort of opened up, you know, we were playing that every 90 minutes on the radio station. I'm like, whoa, I'm giving away Jimmy Eat World tickets on this radio station. What the hell's going on here? And then all of a sudden Sensefield has a single coming out, and there was sort of this, you know, like those sort of emo bands some of them hit pretty mainstream. Mm-hmm. And it was like, wait, I know these bands. I listen to these guys, you know, this is amazing. So that was an odd convergence of worlds.
Right. You're like, I never expect these things to bubble up, like you said, into the adult contemporary world.
Right, yeah, you know, and I'm like, hey, you know, maybe have you ever considered like running a Get Up Kids single? Like, that would be cool, right? And they're like, no, not at all. Like, we'll handle the music. Don't worry. There's a formula, right? And you definitely don't know it.
Right, yeah. You be quiet, young kid.
Yeah.
You hopped around to a bunch of different stations until you kind of landed at ESPN, correct?
Yeah. Although I only worked at a couple, and all of them in Connecticut, or okay. Actually, no, one in Massachusetts. And my plan was I was either going to go to New York. I wanted to work in LA at K-Rock, or up in Boston, there was WFNX. And FNX was like a legendary station, and they were really, really progressive and played great music. And I wanted to work there. And then, you know, somehow I quit my job. This is a crazy story, actually, and it's 100% true. Like one day, just like lost it. I couldn't stand the people I was working with at the radio station, and just sort of like went out like guns blazing, middle fingers everywhere. Like, screw you guys, I'm out. I quit and split. And I left the station. Like, I walked through the door feeling really proud of myself and being like, yeah, screw them. You're not going to take this. And by the time I got to my car in the parking lot, I was like, oh my God, what did I just do? I had to get my job.
Yeah, the weight of it started to crush you.
Yeah, and I'm like, what? I finally got like a decent paying job in radio, and I just quit it. Like, what the hell is wrong with me? But I went to over to, like, at the time, my girlfriend. I went to go see her at her work to tell her, like, hey, I just quit my job, so I don't really know what I'm going to do. And sitting in her office there was a program director for ESPN who had previously worked at the radio station I just quit, and was like, oh man, I can't stand those dudes. They're still there. They're the worst. And we sort of traded stories, commiserated a little bit. And he was just like, so do you need a gig? And I was like, yeah. He said, do you like sports? Like, sure. He was just like, all right, cool. Give me a couple of months. I'll get you in at ESPN. And that's it. It was like,
wow.
That's how it happened. Yeah, amazing.
Then he actually followed through on that, because there's a lot of those sort of random interactions you have where it's like, oh yeah, dude, email me, and then you email them, and then it's like no response. But that's awesome, right, that he actually followed through on that.
Yeah, and I still meet up with him, every couple of months, maybe. We'll catch up or something like that. And he's still, sort of a mentor to me, and certainly a friend. And, meeting him has changed my life exponentially. I couldn't even begin to, wrap my arms around how much he had an impact on my life and how much he changed it.
Right. And honestly, to him, it was as simple as being like, hey, HR, like this person's good, like put their resume at the top of the pile or whatever. And it's like, it's one simple action could change the course of a person's life.
Yeah. And I mean, that's so much of this business is like right place, right time, and who and I just happened to, I hit it both right there in that moment. I just happened to know the right dude at the right place at the right time.
Right. At ESPN, how long did you work there for?
I was at ESPN for a couple of years.
Okay.
And sort of bounced around to different shows and stuff.
Right. Yeah. Because I mean, that's like obviously a huge company, and you can do 5 million different things in there. Yeah. I'm sure there's certain aspects of your jobs that you didn't like. Was it cool being part of like such a large structure like that, or was it kind of, cumbersome and overwhelming?
I really liked it. It felt like from there, the world really opened up, where it was like, oh, wow, I can really make something happen. I went from being on one radio station to producing shows that were now on 400. So it was like, I definitely have options now. And I tried like forever. I just didn't know the right channels for a long time. But to get on the X Games, where it's like, all right, that would be so sick, man. I'm still into skateboarding, a snowboard, I'm like, this would be so rad. But that, so that was sort of the scope of thing. It was like you went from working in radio where, oh, okay, it's cool. Like, radio stations are everywhere. So theoretically I could get a job everywhere, to now I know somebody in every market in the country. Mm-hmm. So, like the world totally opened up.
Yeah, no, that's pretty cool. And especially like you said, where you can kind of have your eyes on so many different avenues that you can go down, and you don't feel, limited to obviously just I'm either doing afternoon radio or morning drive time. Like what? Those are my two options. Yeah. Did you immediately gravitate towards like, cause obviously, the show you're on, the Dan Patrick show you're on now, you're essentially a co-host for the show, right? I mean, or is the label actually producer? Like what, I don't know what role you're actually labeled as.
Weird. If you look at my actual title, it's senior producer / talent, which I don't really know what that means. It's just like HR speak. I would call us more sidekicks.
Okay. And it sounds like that's something that, especially in citing, Howard Stern, obviously, he was always surrounded with very talented sidekicks, as it were. Was that something that you wanted to be like on mic and you were kind of drawn to that? Or, did you like the more behind the scenes, putting together the show sort of stuff?
Well, when I was working in Hartford, I was like the producer / like sidekick guy for the morning show. And so I, put everything together behind the scenes, but I was on air at the same time, and I really liked that. And then when I got to ESPN, I was all behind the scenes, and I missed the on-air part of it. So I knew that somewhere down the road, I definitely wanted to get back on air. I didn't think it would be in sports. I knew that I definitely wanted that part of my career to come back.
There's something that's inherently strange about, like either the desire to like play in a band and like sing or like be in front of people. And then there's a strange feeling of what it's like when you first start, you know, talking on a microphone and like hearing your voice and like having to like fill dead space and stuff like that. Was that, did that come naturally, or was that something that was kind of a learned trait you had to force yourself into?
Yeah, well, it's intimidating, you know? I mean, and even you doing this podcast, I mean, you know what it's like. If somebody doesn't give you an answer, you're like, okay, what am I going to say now?
Totally.
What am I going to do?
Where's this going? Like, you better, and that's, I mean, it's obviously luxurious for me to like, you know, pick and choose my guests, because obviously, like, you know, I'll be frank, like people get pitched to me a decent amount, and I'm like, no, they're like, I either know them or know someone who knows them, and they're not going to be that good of a guest. So for the exact same reasons you illustrate. So yeah, I empathize with what you're saying.
It's so silly now that I work in talk radio, because when I was a DJ at a radio station, and I would see like the intro to this song that you have to talk up is 35 seconds. And I would be like, oh my God, like, what am I going to say for 35 seconds? That's so long, you know, and you're trying to hit the post and you're trying to make everything sound real clean. And I'm like, oh my God, I don't know how I'm going to get 35 seconds. This is going to be a disaster. And then, you know, so you have to work that out. And now you're doing, you know, 15-minute talk segments where that you have to fill up. There is no music. There is no, you know, nothing to sort of bail you out there. But yeah, there's certainly filling the space, I guess, does get a little intimidating, but that's part of the great thing with an ensemble show like us. And you mentioned Howard Stern. You know, this second version of the Dan Patrick Show, away from ESPN, is absolutely modeled 100% after what Howard Stern did. We left there and we're like, all right, so what do we want to do with this new show? And at first it was just Dan talking by himself, just like the old show was, and it just didn't seem to work that right, you know, it just didn't feel the same. It was like, wow, this doesn't feel like it's working at all.
Right.
And we would just sort of, you know, why don't you, maybe you'll chime in a little bit, and then maybe, you know, you'll laugh, and then maybe we'll, you know, do a couple of segments with you and a couple without you. And then it just sort of took off. And we all eventually found our voice, as it were, on the show.
Yeah, no, that's, you know, indicative of what obviously, you know, Dan Patrick and you guys did in regards to, you know, breaking away from the mothership and obviously, you know, creating this space in which you guys could obviously be successful and, you know, I mean, make a living and sustain yourselves. Because it's like you see other people like, you know, obviously Bill Simmons with what he does inside the context of ESPN with Grantland and stuff like that. But then obviously you guys, you know, completely subverted that, and you were just like, okay, well, we can't get shit accomplished in here of what we want to do, so we're going to kind of, you know, do it on their own. Am I reading too much into it, or was it kind of that like, all right, like we really want, you know, I guess full and ultimate control of our own product, so to speak?
You know, when Dan left ESPN, I think it was just sort of, it had just come to an end, and there was it was just a conclusion there, and that chapter in his life was over. And then, you know, he left to start his own company, and, you know, basically took me with him. Which was awesome. And at the time I was, you know, single. Yeah, I wasn't married. I didn't have, you know, my son. All I really had was, you know, pay my rent and go to shows, you know, or whatever it was. So, and then we started doing the show out of his attic, and it was like guerrilla radio, you know, absolutely. We had no idea really the undertaking at first, you know, what we were really signing up for. Because it was just us. There was no engineers. There was no any type of support from anybody, and we had to, you know, literally build it from the ground up. You know, putting in windows and buying the first computer and getting chairs and a desk and a printer and and then building it into, you know, a year later you're on a couple hundred radio stations or something, and it's like, you know, you could watch it grow in leaps and bounds. There were these huge milestones that we would hit, and it was like, whoa, all right, now it's really starting to work, and now it's really taking off. And we did have that total control, although people would push back on certain things where they're like, I don't know. You know, one of the criticisms that we got when the Danettes first started on the air, one of my bosses at the time, he's no longer with the company, but he was just like, I don't know, you can't have that guy seating on the air. He says dude all the time. It was like, oh, like, dude, you don't get it then, you know, because the way it worked out, you know, Dan was the patriarch, right?
Right.
He was the father figure. You had Paul, who was just recently married. You had Todd Fritz, who had been married and had kids. And then you had me, who was the young single one who was still going out every night and hanging with his friends and had no responsibilities and, you know, that kind of thing. So we sort of had every demographic covered.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so that's how the show, it worked that way.
Right. And was it, you mentioned like those milestones, because obviously, like, you know, I mean, I can equate, you know, starting up your own radio show with the same context as obviously starting up your own band. You know, what were the, like, what was one of the milestones that kind of stuck out in your own head that you were like either excited or proud of that stands out to you?
You know, if we hit 12 radio stations and then we jumped up to 50, then you broke 100. And it's like, holy crap. And then we had one day that was actually really bad in the radio industry because like a whole bunch of people got fired by this one company. And it was sort of awful that the same day, like thousands of people were laid off, we got like 150 new stations. And it was like, wow, this actually feels really awful. It was a great moment for us because the show just really hit like a huge number of stations. I think we broke like, you know, 250 at that point or something. But it felt like it came at the cost of, you know, a livelihood for all these people. Not our fault indirectly, you know, not that we were responsible for it, but we were certainly the beneficiaries of it among many other shows. But that felt pretty awful. And so one of the milestones that stands out is actually sort of a bad one.
Yeah. Well, no, that's very interesting because you do, any sort of adult looks at a situation like that and can see like, you know, even though I'm not, like you said, your show is not technically responsible for this. It's like you feel like you want to provide a home for all those people that lost their jobs. You're just like, well, hey, we had something awesome that happened today, but I'm sorry, we can't really we revel in this.
Yeah. And, you know, as someone who came from local radio and then was working on a syndicated network show, you know, I can relate and empathize with people who've worked in local markets and are, you know, hustling, and they took on the jobs of 4 different people to keep their gig there. You know, the industry was really starting to collapse at that point. And I mean, it already had been, but it was really, really, really falling apart. And you just know, you know, how a lot of people like they're just desperate to stay in the industry and keep that job. And then eventually, after all of the sacrifices they had made, it just finally came to an end. And then, yeah, you're the guy who's just like, yeah, but well, it was good for us. That's
right.
Cool.
You know, like, hey, we're growing because we're technically kind of not part of the system, but we are at the same time. Yeah.
Oh yeah. It's so strange. So strange.
No, that's a weird thing. The last thing I want to hit on was the, you know, kind of what we alluded to at the very beginning, where it's like the whole jock mentality, and a lot of people that, you know, don't come from both of our backgrounds, but obviously adopt that mentality, or even people that come from our backgrounds and still have that sort of superiority complex. Do you find that, kind of like ebbs and flows within sports, or do you find that, you know, certain eras of it are more prevalent, you know? Because I just, it's hard for me to sometimes, like the sports that I enjoy, it's like I like basketball and I like golf, and it's like there are so many things that I just don't identify with as far as other sports are concerned, primarily, you know, just because of the a stereotypical fan base, you know. And so yeah, I was just wondering, from you having your unique perspective, you know, do you see it kind of like changing and ebbing and flowing, or you know, I guess, are sports fans more sensitive than they once were? Is like the bullying less? Like, I don't know if you have a perspective on that.
I'm surprised at how much sports and music intersect, and how, you know, we'll have, you know, there's so many, and it's one of my favorite parts of the job is that I've gotten to meet so many people and gotten to know and would consider friends, people from bands that I looked up to and am still a huge fan of and have been for 20, 25, 30 years, that I've gotten to know now through sports. So, you know, to say that, like, you know, Jamie Jotta from Hatebreed is a friend of the show, and he's been awesome. And I got my nose broken at a Hatebreed show almost 20 years ago, you know? And right. So to now have, through the Dan Patrick Show, know him, it was like, whoa, this is crazy. Like, I never saw that coming at all, you know? But if you had told me back in the day that he would be composing a theme for the Dan Patrick Show and I would be on that, and it's, you know, Jamie from read. I'd be like, you're crazy. There's no, it just seems so far-fetched. Or that we would have Odorous from Guar sitting in one day reading our poll question. Okay, that's pretty crazy. I would have never believed that. Greg Hetson from Bad Religion, and we're using Against the Grain as one of our features. And, he's super cool. And, I get to meet him and talk with him. So there's all of these people that are sports fans that I would have never thought were, or would have never imagined these two things would collide. So, I focus a lot on that, and just how it really made me aware that everybody loves music. It's just a matter of which kind of music it is. And that, CJ Wilson, who's a pitcher for the Angels, is like straight edge PMA guy, totally down with H2O and all those guys. Like, it works sort of both ways. I think even one of the guys from like 10-Foot Pole,
Yeah,
I want to say
Scott Radinsky, old pitcher. Yeah, totally.
Right, exactly. So, it intersects more than I ever thought it would. And so, in terms of like the other sort of bully jock mentality, that's definitely there. And on the show, we tend to talk about that quite a bit. Because with the Dan Patrick Show, we talk more issues and societal issues and how things play bigger picture. We don't do any X's and O's. Right. We're never going to break down the Mariners bullpen or,
totally.
the 3-4 defense.
Here's my hot take on what happened last night.
Yeah, that's never going to happen. None of us are interested in that, especially Dan. And it's one of the, reasons that I think I'm so happy and fortunate to be on the show, because this fits my personality perfectly. I'm so into politics and social issues and things like that. And to be able to express those views on a national platform through sports is interesting. And I'm really happy with that.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really important point, because I think that those stereotypes and archetypes of people being bullies within the context of sports, because it's competitive, will always exist, because you're always going to have people drawn to the power of winning and beating somebody. But what's more important is the fact that there can be an alternative conversation about that, like obviously, which is what you're providing. And it's like, that's why obviously I wanted you on the show, is because it's like, we kind of sniff out our own, where it's like, you mentioned Pulley and I'm like, oh yeah, Scott Radinsky. It's like, we have this stupid memory bank of like, oh yeah, here's all these people who are involved. Like, you kind of know where everyone's at, but I think that just shows the fact that it's, like I said, we can kind of, smell out our own. And like, speaking for me personally, I get excited when there's people like you and people like you said, CJ Wilson and all these other people that are in prominent positions that are hopefully being able to use that position to hopefully influence people for, good, and showcase the fact that there's another voice besides the mass one that's out there.
Absolutely. And, just sort of that power of positive thinking is so important. And you do have people that when you can connect these dots, and find commonality with people that you wouldn't normally expect to, I think it's ultimately a really positive thing, and just sort of reinforces, just positivity, positive vibes, good things. And, you're not alone in the world, you know?
Right. Yeah. This weird subculture is, kind of much larger than we all originally anticipated when we first got into it when we were, 12, 13, 14 or whatever. The last thing I want to mention want to ask was, because obviously you have, such an experience within music, and I'm sure you pitch ideas, and like you're obviously, like you mentioned, Jamie Jostin, it's like you're excited to have him on the show. And I'm sure the other, Dan and the other, co-hosts that you have are excited to some extent, but I'm sure that they find your enthusiasm for these people that are relatively unknown in the mainstream spectrum to be quite hilarious. Like, is it funny when you're like, oh, dude, but this guy's coming? They're like, who?
Yeah, absolutely. Because, we can meet, like, we'll get somebody in studio, like Kobe Bryant will come in. I'll be like, hey, what's up, Kobe? How you doing? All right, cool. Because it's just like, dude, yeah, that's awesome, man. He's like one of the best basketball players of all time. That's really awesome. But then, yeah, Odorous is sitting in, and I'm like, oh my God, this is so sick. I can't believe that we're going to do this, So I definitely geek hard on, that's just sort of where my passion is. I love sports are fun, but there's that connection, that emotional connection you have with music. It still dominates, who I am and my personality and my thoughts and feelings. And it just, sometimes you turn into a 16-year-old all over again when you're like, wow, I can't believe I'm going to get to meet this guy, or this guy is going to come on the show, or whatever it is,
Right. Totally. Yeah. You fall back into that world of being like, oh my gosh, they're larger than life.
But I give Dan a lot of credit though. I've mentioned it a couple times, but to have, Odorous from Guar to come sit in, and be on the show. And I could see some of the other members of the show were like, what in the hell are we doing, and how did Seaton talk Dan into doing this, because this is crazy. And luckily it worked, because I would have really had to eat crow or whatever for a long time. But to see him there, this big alien with his ass hanging out, talking about the Redskins, giving like a really serious take on why the Washington Redskins need to change their name. And he's hitting making some, great points, and it's something that he cares about. And then at the same time, he's got like this, gigantic spikes coming off of his shoulders and, whatever else. It was fantastic.
Right. He has phallic symbols attached to his body.
Exactly. He had to put away the cuttlefish
for
the night, but instead wore something he called the mangina, which I was like, all right, cool. Like this is actually on, national TV right now. Right. And I'm so thankful that it worked.
Yeah, no, that's really exciting. Well, dude, I really appreciate you hanging out on this, and I think this was a perfect. You were a perfect guest, and you were able to share a perspective that most people don't have, working in a major sports world, so to speak. So, thank you.
Yeah, awesome, dude. Thank you, man. I really appreciate it.
All right, there was the show. There was Patrick. Thank you very much, Patrick. I appreciate you hanging out with me for that long. We were in a scheduling battle. We kept scheduling, rescheduling. There was a time where he called me and I was like, oh, you're 3 hours early. And he's like, you're right. We were on different coasts. But anyways, thank you so much, Patrick. I really appreciate that. Visit the show's website, 100wordspodcast.com. The producer, as always, is Tom Richfield, forever attached to this show until the day he dies. I might want to etch it into his gravestone, just out of sheer attachment to the show. I'm going to enjoy Paris. You have a good week, and I will talk to you next week. Be safe, everybody.
This episode is brought to you by Toyota. Toyota is a leader when it comes to electrified vehicles. Today, battery EVs make up less than 10% of new vehicles sold because of higher cost and concerns about range and charging. Enter Beyond Zero, Toyota's vision for a carbon-neutral future. With an electrified, diversified lineup of hybrids, plug-in hybrids, and battery EVs, Toyota empowers you to choose how to reduce your own carbon footprint. Learn more and get details at toyota.com/beyond0. Toyota, let's go places.
Have you heard about Vyvgart? Vyvgart Tegamod Alpha FCAB? Ask your neurologist if Vyvgart could be right for you, and learn more at vyvgart.com/learn. That's VYVGART.com/learn. Brought to you by argenx.
Hey, hair enthusiasts. Ready for the holidays must-have beauty tool? The Not Doctor Dryer Brush by Conair is not just a dryer brush. It's complete with all the fancy features that you know and love from the salon. From custom heat settings that won't damage your hair, a refreshing cool burst to lock in your style, and gentle bristle tips that detangle with ease. This is your new blowout BFF. This holiday season, give yourself or someone else the gift of flawless hair. Shop the Not Doctor by Conair for damage-free styling. Happy shopping and happy holidays.